The US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, as I was mentioning there, has warned that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan might be imminent, but he said European countries should leave Asian security to America and concentrate on the defense of Europe.
Any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent.
Well, Pete Hegseth warned Asian nations against accepting economic support from China and urged them to follow the example of European governments in committing to increased defence spending. Pete Hegseth also rejected the notion that the US under President Trump is isolationist, saying America first does not mean America only or America alone. Let's speak to Professor Steve Tsang, who's director of the China Institute at the SOAS school. Tell us what you make of what Pete Hegseth has been saying.
Well, in a sense, it was a positive message because there's been worries that the Trump administration is unreliable in terms of like the Taiwan's security, not like the Biden administration. So this public articulation of U.S. support to Taiwan's security under the Trump administration is a positive step. But I think we should be clear. He didn't say that China's attack of Taiwan is imminent. He's simply saying that it could be because the Chinese are building up the capabilities to do so.
But he also said that he felt that they were building up their forces, that they were training, and that they would be ready to launch a possible invasion within 2 years. And some of the language that we've heard from those around President Xi has been pretty threatening. Do you think he is overstating the threat or the potential of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan then?
I think senior American officials have a vested interest to slightly exaggerate the intensity and imminence of the threat. Because to counter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which, as you say, Xi Jinping is committed to do at some stage, a lot of preparation will need to be done, and it will take a lot of time to prepare for it. So if they wait until the Chinese invasion is actually imminent, what preparation they can do will be much too late. The fact that you have built the amphibious ships and aircraft carriers and other facilities for invading Taiwan doesn't mean that you have the military trained, ready to execute, which will be one of the most difficult operations in human history.
So do you think that those words from Pete Hegseth were an attempt to make China to back off? And I mean, are they likely to be seen in China as provocative?
Well, the Chinese will always see anything coming from senior American officials that stand by Taiwan firmly as provocative, even if it is something which is clearly trying to say that, please don't do it, we don't want a war, and a war will be utterly devastating. That essentially is what the message was being sent by Pete Hegseth. I think the message is meant not only for deterring China, but also for kicking the American allies in the Indo-Pacific so that they can actually toughen up in terms of their preparations. And that includes Taiwan as well.
But isn't part of the point that many of those other nations aren't prepared to stand up to China because they fear its military might?
Well, if you really are thinking only in terms of the ASEAN country, the 10 countries in Southeast Asia, then there is not really much of a chance that they will build up military capabilities and join the American side in fighting, apart from providing bases and facilities for U.S. ships and aircraft. But then you are also talking about wider Indo-Pacific allies of the United States, from Japan to Korea to Australia and potentially even New Zealand. So there are others there which I think the Americans are also engaging with.
So, can I just one other point that Pete Hegseth made? I mean, he was saying that this should not be an area where the Europeans try to get involved. But given that we know that China is supporting Russia in terms of the war in Ukraine, isn't it inevitable that the UK and other European allies will also see the need to try to ensure that China is aware that they are also very concerned about their behavior?
I think the message here being sent by the US Defense Secretary is a bit unclear. What would make sense would be America working with its European allies for the European allies to backfill American obligations, military obligations outside of the Indo-Pacific region in the event of a crisis, so that the United States can redeploy practically all available American military assets to the Indo-Pacific theater to deal with the threat from China. And there's also a need to get European support in the wider diplomatic and deterrence side. But the actual deployment of European forces to the Indo-Pacific would not be the most effective use of resources in the event of an actual crisis.
Professor Steve Tsang, Director of the China Institute at the School of Oriental and African Studies. Really good to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mr. Hegseth said in the morning regarding...
What he said is undeniable. China's activities are getting more expansive and more aggressive. Their demonstrations of force are getting more frequent. And in the West Philippine Sea, we are getting used to their activities, but they have expanded the areas where they are doing it, to include their exercises of Australia and New Zealand, and in the eastern part of our east, in the Pacific Ocean. The international order to one more favorable to them. What are the conditions that I feel would make engaging in a defense sphere with China plausible? First, they have to renounce their narrative that the 9-dash line, a lot of which is even beyond the outer boundaries of the EEZ, as close as 50 kilometers away or 60 kilometers away from our shores. They have to renounce it as non-negotiable and as indisputable sovereignty and jurisdiction of China.
To the US as a country that's close to the US but also has...
Secondly, they have to prove beyond all reasonable doubt good faith. Third, they have to renounce the subterfuges that they use in order to try to reshape the international order to one more favorable to them. Fifth, to stop all nefarious activities to try to subvert our society.
Are you disappointed that you couldn't see your Chinese counterpart, Dong Jun, on this visit?
Well, I believe my foreign affairs colleagues are trying their level best to engage China, but on the defense side, I see what we have seen is that China has to overcome a deficit of trust and credibility that it has implanted not only in the defense establishment but on the ordinary Filipino itself, himself or herself.